Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's show, we're going to dive into a topic that I think a lot of us have questions about, which is ADAS. And we're going to do it with a guy who works with ADAS each and every day. Jay Aebert is an ADAS calibration and field operations technician with a lot of years of experience. Welcome to the show, Jay. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always great when we have another Jay on the show. And I think the difference between us two as Jays are going to be that you have a wealth of experience with ADAS. And it's a topic that I think a lot of us, as this keeps evolving, as the technology keeps evolving, have questions around. So I'm excited to dive into that. But I first have to ask about your soccer background. This is kind of unique in that you have a very, very extensive background in soccer.
I do. Well, I was born and raised in Germany. I lived there for 25 years, and soccer is, or football, as most people call it. I had to put that one in there. Is a big thing in Germany, as it is all over Europe and well, many other parts of the world, and it's becoming a very interesting part in the United States as well. So yes, I played competitively from early age on. Made it into a quote unquote semi professional, but not beyond that. So I'm not that good. But yes, soccer is a big passion, it's a big part of my life. And outside of my family, soccer is my other wife for sure.
It's interesting. I grew up similar to a lot of Americans. I feel like not knowing a whole lot about soccer, and my 7-year-old son now plays soccer. So I'm learning a little bit as we go. And it is a really, really interesting sport. And I could see why somebody could get passionate about it. And it is funny that we in the U.S. are still holding on to the soccer thing. I think our American football kind of is in the way of everybody else adopting the football reference as we're talking about soccer.
Yeah, it's getting definitely more like that. And we all you always get that kind of side remark from anybody outside the US. It really is football. And I call American football hand egg because it's an egg and you use your hands. So um, it's always a good topic of conversation, right? I mean, you can really get people going with it.
Oh, absolutely. A great conversation starter, regardless. Now, we're going to talk about ADAS today, and it's a topic that is ever changing right now. I think so many of us in the industry want to have a better hold of it, a better understanding of it. And because you get to work with it each and every day, you bring that background of being able to maybe better inform us on a lot of things. But I'm guessing you didn't start off as an ADAS technician, right? ADAS wasn't around back when you started.
No, I'm not that young. So no, I started with carburetors, to be honest with you. Um, So I started in the late 80s, well, let's say early 90s. Sounds a little bit better for me. So I have over 30 years of experience in the industry by now. And the ADAS really started for me about 5 years ago when I got with a company who is very heavily focused on the ADAS calibration and uh, yeah, diagnostics, scans, diagnostics, that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of companies out there who are really getting into that. So there was a lot of new learning for me, and it continues. It continues going as it
So,
changes.
so when you started off with carburetors. You've seen the evolution over time to where we go to fuel injection, a lot more computer controlled engines in general, and different modules throughout a vehicle. Uh, what has been the biggest switch for you? Has it been the ADAS, or what, or was it the carburetors to fuel injection? Like what was the biggest jump for you in your head?
Well, the carburetors are the bigger jump from the fuel injections because I still got to know the carburetors, but fuel injection definitely took over, was in the majority of cars. So the biggest jump for me is the massive amount of modules installed now. The all the CAN networks, the I mean, the diagnostic itself and how certain things in your electronics make such a massive difference or have an impact on everything in the car. When we're talking about your infotainment system in the center console to your, I mean, some things don't work if a simple, just the generator not working correctly or your battery is weak. We have a massive amount of faults in the system creating, and they're not even necessarily something critical, but if you do then a health scan and you end up with 20, 30 fault messages, it can be overwhelming for somebody who's not really knowing what they get into. If you just have a generic scanner, you may not even get that deep into the security gateway and all these blocks manufacturers are throwing in there today. So yes, that is the biggest thing: knowing where the fault's coming from, what causes them, and understanding where we're going with it is a crazy challenge. And I will add this: I was out of the automotive industry for about 12 years, and like I said, I got back in 5 years ago, and it was absolutely mind blown when I came back in because I started with the simplest. When Istar and BMW, that was one of the major car brands I was working on when I was still actually on the car. They came out, and it was a very simple process, really. And now every car manufacturer has this very unique process in scanning vehicles, and we're using OE tools to do that for my line of work. Um, it's learning every day. It's learning something new every day.
Yeah, and you've changed a lot over the years too, because when you're talking 25 years ago, you're actually in a bay working on a car, whereas like current day, you're working behind a laptop all day, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, on the computer, laptop. Um, as far as ADAS goes, there's still a not necessarily, well, there can be a mechanical part to it, but there's also a setup part with targets and all kinds of different unique situations. Any manufacturer has different situations or setup requirements and pre requirements before you even start the calibration.
Yeah, I think where a lot of people really start to get a little anxious or nervous in maybe taking on ADAS, and one of the things that I think is almost confusing to our industry right now is which side owns ADAS, right? Is it the collision side? Is it the repair side? And I'm seeing a little bit of both, right? You'll see more and more mobile diagnostic techs that are doing some of this type of work, whereas you see a lot of collision shops doing it. And I think the collision shops, it's really natural for a collision shop to either do it or have quick access to somebody that can do it, because if you're replacing that front bumper or whatever it might be, you've got to do the correct calibrations. And I'm interested to hear from your perspective, who owns that. Is it a little bit of everybody, or is it going to be kind of its own subsector where you're going to have ADAS specific shops? What's your feeling on that as we move forward?
That's a great question. That really is a good question. Many manufacturers or OEMs require calibrations if you do anything suspension related. So no, it's not only collision. We see it most in the collision world because collision has panel repairs where the modules are mounted. Some of the modules are mounted in the bumpers themselves. So as soon as you take a bumper off for whatever reason, there's a recalibration needed to be done. And I will say this: there's a lot of mobile technicians out there. Education on this is a big thing. I've seen a lot of mobile techs making a quick buck, going in business by themselves, don't have access to the necessary right information, and can make matters worse. This is a big thing. I feel education is incredibly important. And I see a lot of still adjusters or estimators in the collision repair industry not really knowing what we're talking about. And it's like, oh, it's going to be okay. We're just going to let it go because they just want to push the end of the day, end of the month, whatever it is. And that is the biggest thing to me, what I see. And again, I'm from Germany. We're going by the book. That's it. That's it. You have to follow the instructions. You have to, and that is the biggest thing. What I see in ADAS for myself, I feel you need to follow the procedure, because if there's something wrong with the alignment, if the requirements calling for tire pressure in a full tank, there's a reason for it. And I think we want to put the customer back in a vehicle which is safe and sound. When you mount a tire, you make sure that the lug nuts are torqued so that thing is not coming off. When you do the ADAS, you make sure the person gets back in a vehicle so the front radar is not picking something up and then applying brakes for no reason, or is not applying brakes for no reason. And that can cause another casualty. But even if it's just a fender bender, it's a massive inconvenience for anybody involved. And I think we need to own that responsibility, whether you're in the bay and you're mounting tires, you're hanging brakes, you're changing oil, whatever it is you're doing to a customer's car, there's somebody riding on these tires, and it may be a full family, and you have to own that. This is, to me, I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about it. To me, the number one thing, and seeing people creating a bad name for this industry, whether it's ADAS related or anybody else, because they don't care enough, they don't want to have that ownership of their actions. I have very little patience for that or tolerance for that. It is not something I can deal with really easily.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of shy around this a little bit, right? Or aren't overly anxious to get into the ADAS business. I was actually just down in North Carolina for the Southeast Collision Conference. I gave a talk down there. I spoke to a group, and then I was able to step out and go to another session that somebody else was running that was talking about ADAS and going through all the intricacies of ADAS and how many people are doing it wrong right now and kind of just checking the box that they did it. And I think by doing that and not really kind of following procedure for that calibration or whatever it might be that you're doing, you are putting somebody at risk, and you're putting yourself at risk, because I think you hold the liability then, right? If you checked off that you did a repair, and similar to any other repair that we put through our shops, if we're not documenting properly, or if we're not really stating all of the work that we did and how we did it, we set ourselves up for a bad spot, right? If we're not really taking this seriously. And I think to me, that is where it has been tough for shops to really get their hands around this, on what their involvement should be, what the potential business is out there to have, right? I do think it can be a really good business. But if you look at maybe a simple repair such as an alignment, if you have to tag a calibration along with that, which it sounds like that's something we have to do, right? We're supposed to be doing a calibration. If you're doing an alignment, you're adding a significant amount of cost to that alignment. And so trying to explain that to a customer can be really difficult. I just think from a shop's perspective, there's a lot of concern over what we should be doing, how we should be doing it. Should we own the equipment ourselves? If every alignment needs one, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but if every alignment needs one, then you almost have to bring it in-house, right? Because a lot of shops are doing a bunch of alignments. And if we have a bunch of alignments, it's going to be really hard to sublet that out if you can take it on and do it yourself.
Well, as for the alignments, if you obviously do a suspension repair where you replace parts of the suspension, most service information requires that. And it really makes sense if you think about it, right? We're changing the alignment of the vehicle, so we're changing the way it goes, and we just want to make sure that everything is working when this is the case. But number one is really inform yourself, get some service information. There are different providers who give you the information you need to know, and even helplines are an option. If you really care about the repair you're performing and you get your customer back into a safe car, then that's something you need to do now. You need to learn about it. And I think the ASE has added an actual ADAS test to it. I think it's called L4.
Yeah.
Always worth learning about it. iCar has a lot information on it, so that subscription can, help you identify those items and help you identify what needs to be done, and it will help you in the process as well. But yeah, it's something new still. The first ADAS component was a tire pressure monitor, right? And that is not even that old. It's what, 20 years old, maybe? I don't
Yeah.
know. And the second ADAS system was a backup camera. There was not really much calibration to be done off. But if you put a new tire pressure monitor on, you do have to learn it to it, and that's pretty much in a little bit more involved way now with all the other new modules. You have to, if you have a new module, you have to learn it to, or give it a handshake with the car. You have to program it, and then you have to tell it basically where to look. What are you looking for and where to look, and that is the calibration. We're just aiming the components in the right direction, and then so they can help having your vehicle in a safe environment driving down the road.
So you've got 5 years into this now, and you know a lot about it. If you're somebody like me that's just starting off and really starting to understand this, where would you start in terms of doing your research? And is it going through maybe the actual laws themselves to understand what a shop's responsibility is? Would it be going through a technical type of provider that will give you information? What's the best way to really dig into this and understand?
I think the first thing is to know what systems are on the car and starting to learn about that. There are different manufacturers, obviously have different systems, and we can go in detail, but then we're going to talk for about 5 hours on this. So first off, you got to know what you're working on. It's like starting the business as a oil change technician, and you have to get to know the system, and you just take the time to learn what you're dealing with. If there's anything, well, I want to say 2018 and newer, there is a pretty darn good chance there's some ADAS on it. And that would be my first thing. It's like, okay, find out what's going on there. There are, like I said, you have different resources, whether it's iCar or whether it's ADAS or Mitchell, check all the boxes. There is information there. You can find it. You really have to look for it. That has to come from you. There's interest in it has to come from you or the technician who's working on it. Educate yourself, right? It doesn't help just to assume something, because that way you know where that one can go. But that's your responsibility. And as a shop owner or as a technician who really cares about it, like I said earlier, this is your job. And I feel this is where we can make up a lot of our reputation and why we're earning the money we earn, or why we're charging the prices we charge. And we'll continue to learn. Well, you're not just paying for the service, you're paying for the experience and the knowledge too. And that is our job, in my opinion. So, like I said, I'm learning every day, and I'm reaching out in different helplines, which I have within my company. I have a lot of great colleagues who have been helping me getting into this and getting more knowledgeable and getting to the point where I'm at today.
So a lot of our listeners are coming from independent shops as well. And when we talk about knowing which cars coming in and what systems they have, that can be another challenge, right? Because if every car that's coming in is a different make and manufacturer, I think that that adds some challenge, right? Because if you could almost do full time just researching ADAS and ADAS systems, when you look at the typical vehicle coming in and the typical repair, and being able to check to see what systems it has, a lot of times, I think, especially those in a flat rate environment, you're trying to get through those cars, right? You're trying to really get through those. So to sit down and take the time to understand each system individually would be challenging. Is there kind of a core understanding or knowledge of ADAS systems that applies to everything? Or so if when we're talking about doing research, that you could do the research on ADAS as a whole, and then the different complexities of each system might come with time. But are there some core principles or core ideologies that as you're diving into ADAS, that is, if you understand it, it will help you across all ADAS systems?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you have control buttons inside the vehicle. You can identify when you crank up the car. Um, for instance, blind spot monitors in the rear of the vehicle usually have some kind of warning light coming on as soon as you turn the key on in the mirrors. There's most of the time an amber light, which will come up and it will tell you that the system is up and running. You have in the steering wheel, you have controls which will give you your cruise control, but also will give you a distance um, adjuster who is your dynamic cruise control, which will keep the distance to the car in front of you. So that's an ADAS system. So these two are very easy. When you walk up to a car, you see most of the time now a camera in the windshield, right where the rear mirrors inside. That is an
Yeah.
ADAS, this camera. So it's very simple to identify this just with a couple quick looks. And again, I think Google and YouTube are great tools if you're really into it. You can just type in, or yeah, type in ADAS on the specific vehicle you're looking for and what's available and how to identify it. You can do that within a couple minutes. Um, I had a colleague learning on, well, not a colleague, but an apprentice I work with, learning how to drive a stick shift by watching a YouTube video, and he did it in within 5 minutes. So the information is out there. It's not hard. So to identify it real quick, I wouldn't say become an expert in it, but you can find the information, especially these days on the internet. It is crazy quick. It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of resources and other podcasts that are talking about it more frequently than what we do on our podcast, that have more technical nature behind it. So I do think there are a pile of resources, and I think, just having an understanding of what ADAS even means in terms of that camera on the rear view, that what the backup camera, any of it is just, the more you can kind of understand what it is and really comprehend whether a new vehicle or a vehicle that you're working on has it, probably is the first step. Now, very stupid, naive question for my end, but if an ADAS calibration is off, does it set a check engine light of any type or any type of warning to let you know that something's out of calibration?
Not necessarily. That's the terrible thing about it, really. And that's what creates a bad name for it, with a lot of people doing just something and charging for it. And that goes back to your whole, documentation. The process we're having, where I'm working, is that we take pictures, that we have the service information attached to the report, that we have a pre-calibration health scan and a post-calibration health scan, and that we do a test drive of a minimum of 4 to 5 miles, just to confirm everything is there. So that is the biggest thing, that you have the documentation, that they know what they're working on. For the person who just gets started, it's pretty much with everything else in life. Repetition is the key to learning.
I'm surprised that there's no type of warning indicator of some type from the OEs when they're putting these vehicles out. If this is such a concern, why wouldn't they trigger something to tell or warn the driver that something's out of, it's not working properly? Doesn't that seem like kind of a low hanging fruit thing for a manufacturer to kind of have there some type of driver warning? As advanced as this technology is, you'd think it'd be pretty easy just to trigger some form of light if it's not working properly.
Well, you have to drive it in order to know that it's not working properly. So if you go out and you do the repair, let's stay in the collision industry for now,
Sure.
because that's where we see it the most. If they do a repair to the quarter panel and they put the, let's say, the blind spot module mounted back on the quarter panel, go out and drive, the blind spot module doesn't know that it's mounted wrong. How, it's not. And there's there are installation checks to make sure that it's done correctly, and then there's either a static or dynamic calibration, which tells me this module is mounted correctly, and it will give me the right warning when there's something coming from behind on the left or right side, and it will give me a warning if I want to change lanes and something is there. Well, if that module is not mounted correctly and nobody's doing the calibration, that module is still looking and it doesn't know that something is wrong unless something electronically is incorrect. It can't tell you. It's really just a radar sensor which is picking up something metal object coming on behind you. So no, there's not really a way to tell that that's the case unless there is an event at the time of the collision where the vehicle got hit and the system realized immediately that this module is out of alignment.
I do think there are some warning systems, right? And I look back to like driving my truck. It's a newer truck, and it will tell you while you're driving. Like, say, if you're driving, a lot of times this happens in the snow, right? We're in a northern climate, a lot of snow, and as you're going, and it kind of fogs up the lens or it covers the lens with snow, it'll say a warning of that your whatever part of the system isn't working, or it'll say that it's disengaged, or I don't even remember what the warning message is. So I guess there are kind of some signals to tell a driver in not necessarily a repair scenario, but just in general, if you're driving and something impairs the ability for that system to tell you something's wrong, you do get some type of warning.
Yeah. I'm thinking you're talking about your lane departure camera in your truck.
Yeah.
Yes, if it's covered with ice or snow, then it will tell you that the system is not in action. Or if you're going too slow, for instance, if you go below 25 miles an hour, it will give you a warning that your radar is not working anymore because you're too slow, or your blind spot monitors are not. So there's a warning, and you can identify those clearly. But like I said, if something is mounted and remounted and there's no event, let's say I bring the car in, I repair it, even if it's I repair it and I disconnect everything, but I don't turn the key back on. I don't have an electronic event because the system is not looking for the module and it's not looking to get ready and get everything up going. So if I don't turn the key back on or I disconnect the batteries, then everything is done, or it will not show. And lo and behold, there are no warning lights on and you're good to go. If you disconnect the battery in most SI information, you are supposed to reset the steering angle sensor. How many shops are doing that?
Right? That makes a lot more sense to me when you're saying that, right? If you're repairing or replacing that sensor, you're repairing a panel that's got the sensor on it and you're just kind of putting it back on there. That makes a lot more sense to me. Do you think there'll be a time where that kind of automatically senses where it's at so that it's not as much of a surprise if it's not aimed correctly? Or is it something that is forever ongoing and we don't know? But to me, I see kind of an opportunity there again from the OE side where if with the amount of technology that we have for a sensor to understand where it's at in terms of being able to like just know that it's off right off the bat. Do we get to that point someday, or is it a sensor, and that's just the way it's going to be forever?
Again, great question. How many times does your engine know that it doesn't have the wrong weight oil in it?
Great rebuttal. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, and I think just by you kind of explaining that at a really elementary level helped me kind of get my hands around that side, because that makes a lot of sense to me. The one where I'm a little bit more confused is if you do an alignment, of course, you're going to change maybe the angle of the steering. Now, are you saying only if you change a part with an alignment you need to do a calibration, or is it if you're doing any alignment whatsoever?
There are different procedures or different requirements from different OEMs. So
okay,
I cannot be very detailed on it, but some say, okay, if the alignment changes and you realign the car, it automatically points somewhat in a different direction. So you should recalibrate your system, even if it was working fine pre-collision. I'm going to the collision, and
yeah,
you putting it back into the pre-collision conditions. We don't know how well that all is aimed, or the radars, and in particular the radar in the front, for that matter, because that looks ahead and sees what's in front of you. And if that aims incorrectly, it's just a degree off. You go a degree for 10 feet, that's not much in the difference. But if you go 200, 500 feet ahead, that can be a big difference. And that radar can look into the different lane, whether right or left. But it's going a little bit, for lack of better words, cross-eyed, and is looking in the wrong direction. And just understanding how that system works is the biggest thing in order for you to identify what needs to be done. And as far as I'm concerned, it's part of the repair procedure now, per service information. Why wouldn't we just do what service information calls for and do the repair correctly? So that should be really, and that's, again, in the collision side, this is your job as the estimator or as the technician who's working on the car to either outsource it and identify the systems are there, which is mostly done with a pre-repair scan. We identify what's going on. We see what's happening. We can identify if there are any modules damaged, if there's wiring issues, and we can give you the information. It's like, hey, this and this is offline. This and this shows that there's a problem. If the car was hit in the back and it was just a small hit, and everybody goes, well, it's just a scratch on the bumper. Well, the bumper bounces back, and if you hit it right in the right spot, that control module, that blind spot module, for instance, can be offline. It can be damaged, and it needs to be replaced. And you run out of a $250 repair, all of a sudden there's a $400 repair or a $400 part which needs to go back on, plus a whatever $500 calibration. And then there's $250 repairs well over $1,000. The customer goes like, okay, this is not a customer pay. So these are the things many shops forget about or have not on their radar yet, I guess. And that's a responsibility, and that's the biggest thing. The information is out there. You got to seek the information. You got to find the information to have a good repair done to the vehicle and make sure your customer is getting back into a safe vehicle.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics says technicians make around $46,000 a year. Does that sound like BS to you? We thought so too. At WrenchWay, we work with some of the best shops and dealerships across the country, and we've seen technicians make a lot more than that. So we decided to gather our own data. We're excited to announce the launch of our new online technician pay tool. You can now search technician pay by industry, shop type, location, and experience. We've already had over 3,000 technicians submit their pay data anonymously. You can explore the pay data and even submit your own data anonymously at wrenchway.com/pay. Thank you for your continuous support of WrenchWay as we strive to promote and improve automotive and diesel careers. We couldn't do it without you. Now, you talked about the space needed to do these types of repairs, and I'm interested how much that part is going wrong, right? And when I say that, if you hear about that mobile diagnostic tech that's going out with their van, they have the same space restrictions that any other shop has, right? And if they're trying to do it outside or something along those lines, I'd assume that you're going to have some interference with sun or outside elements, and maybe that's not the right way to do it. Walk me through that part a little bit, because I feel like if you don't have the space to properly do it, you're probably just not going to properly do it.
Correct. Yeah. These are all the preconditions I was referring to earlier. You know, you have to have a certain environment. Doing it in snow or rain is a no-go. Obviously, it won't work. As you identified already, the snow will not even turn your system on if it's covered. You have to be on a level ground. Like I said, some vehicles require a pre-alignment before you even do that. You have some vehicles require a full tank of gas because it's just how the vehicle sits, and sometimes the tank is in the back. And if we don't have a full tank of gas, the whole dynamics of the vehicle, the whole setup of the vehicle, where it just looks up a little or pushes down a little. So all this kind of stuff, the vehicle, almost every service information requires an empty vehicle with no load in it, except for a full tank of gas and obviously your car jack and your spare tires. So all these requisite for this is very important to know. And that's the mobile technicians. Again, this is what I'm getting at. Some asking for a bumper off when you do an installation check. You document that. You make sure that module is mounted correctly and it's pointing in the right direction. I've seen mobile technicians when I worked in different shops doing a blind spot calibration with a bumper on, even though their service information requires a bumper off. And I'm just asking myself, okay, does the shop know what they're paying for? And this is part of the repair again. So I don't take that very lightly. I'm taking this very serious, and I'm really, all I'm asking is the people who do the job not correctly. I hope you can, look the customer in the eye and tell them that you messed up. Or I don't know.
Just being honest, right? Like, and transparent. I think it goes a long way. If you are doing it correctly, you need to be educating customers. You need to be helping them understand why it's needed and just helping them get behind it. Now, the one thing that kind of cracks me up a little bit, and I'd be interested in getting an OE on at some point to talk about this, maybe an engineer of some type. I don't get the full tank of gas thing, because how often are you actually driving a vehicle with a full tank of gas, right? Like, I think if you're actually driving it, you're probably, you're at a full tank of gas for the first, however many miles, right. But then you're probably more often driving it at half to 3/4 tank or whatever it might be. So wouldn't that change the dynamic? Like, if you're, you did it with a full tank, but if it has that much influence on it and you're pretty consistently driving on less than a full tank, wouldn't that be off from the start?
Well, you always have a tolerance, right? So my tolerance is it's calculating the tolerance for the empty tank as well as for the full tank. And it wants your 0 point, the 0 point with a full tank of gas. If the tank is mounted on the right side, for instance, under the cabin and not in the back, then that changes how the car is sitting. And your 0 point is with a full tank of gas in that particular. So
Makes total
Be
sense.
more technical or about this, please talk to an engineer. I'm
Yeah.
just taking your word for it as far as the service information. That's my documentation again. Service information says this. This is what I do. I had to go and get a full tank of gas, and and we're taking a picture of that too. We're taking a picture of the gas gauge before, after. We're showing the mileage before, after we do the test drive. We're identifying, and then after all that is done, we're doing that post calibration scan showing that all the faults have been eliminated or have been cleared and that they have not returned after the test drive. So that's our part of the calibration or our documentation. And sadly, there are a lot of other companies out there who are doing it a whole lot quicker. And I would tell you, when you take 40, 50 pictures per procedure or per calibration, this can be very tedious and it's not fun. It's taking a lot of time. And so when somebody asks us, how come your calibration takes you an hour and a half, and this guy can do it in 15 minutes? Well, he didn't take the bumper off, he didn't take any pictures, and he didn't look up the service information. So that saved you, what, 30 minutes easily already. So that's where we go. And that's, well, people need to know $450 for 10 minutes or $450 for an hour and a half, there's a quality difference.
Yeah. I think that's the challenging part about this, right? There's a lot left up to interpretation, and maybe not even interpretation. It's just that maybe we haven't done the research that we should have as shops, or that we aren't taking it as seriously as we need to. And, I think in a lot of shops, you look at it and you're trying to find that technician that could actually do the things, right? Like you made that transition, and it was because you were a really good technician prior, in a prior life. And I think those, a lot of the basics and understanding of electricity probably really helped you as you transitioned over. And I think there's a lot of shops that struggle to find that right person to do that. And so when you're talking about a big investment in equipment and maybe not fully understanding the potential of more business out of it, what does that mean? Because you're going to spend probably quite a lot of money, not only in the equipment, but if you don't have the proper space, you probably are going to have to add on to your building. Like there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes people really, really nervous, is just not knowing what the market potential is, along with not truly understanding how expensive it's going to be to add ADAS to your service offering.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's very difficult, especially for repair facilities, just, regular service facilities who are non-dealers, like you said, privately owned, or yes, I agree. Space is a big thing. It is in the collision industry, and we're still seeing collision uh, shops not willing to provide the space needed or not having the space needed because they're just really maxed out for maximum profit, being profitable. I mean, you want to stay in business for a reason, and you don't just want to do it to be a good Samaritan, right? You don't want to be just a good person and help other people. You want to make a living too. But at the same time, we owe that to the people who are wanting to drive the car and want to provide a living for their families. So it's a give and take, right? Um, Good thing is there's a lot of independent, or not independent, but calibration technicians out there. Meanwhile, or sorry, in the meantime, you can definitely outsource that, and obviously you have to add it to your repairs. That's one thing. I don't think in your regular repair shop you do not see ADAS calibrations too often as in the
Right.
collision repair. Um, but just know, if there is a event where you have to repair suspension parts, that there may be a requirement, and you should really do a little bit extensive work in it. That's the biggest thing. If you take a bumper off, some repair procedures you have to take a bumper off. Just take an extra look at it. Is there something mounted in there? And Some vehicles now with the parking sensors, they need to be recalibrated when you take it off. And it doesn't happen very often in most repair shops. I don't think. I don't recall doing that a lot, taking bumpers off or anything like that. But yeah, do your work. Just make sure you provide your customer with a safe repair.
I think there are becoming more and more classes available, whether it's going to Vision or if it's going to SEMA or Apex, whatever it might be. You are seeing more and more offerings where a technician can sit in a class or a shop manager can sit in a class and really understand it at a different level. A lot of the content that you referred to, I know Scott Brown, who's been on our podcast in the past, he puts out a lot of really, really good content. I do think maybe as we see an increase in EV count in shops, maybe you'll see more and more of a necessity for it. I think it becomes a little bit more obvious then when you do see that electric vehicle come in the doors, because there is more, right? In a lot of cases, a lot more ADAS involved. So I think when you talk about informing yourself, I think this is something that, if you're in the industry and this is a concern for you, that you should spend a fair amount of time doing your research and really digging in, because I do think it's one of those things that can drive some passion. And the more you learn about it, maybe the more thirsty you are to learn even more about it. Right. So it is, it's new and it's different. And when I say new, it's not that new. It's been around for a while now, but I think we've kind of, in a lot of cases, tried to put it on the back burner. And there's a few in the industry that have done an exceptional job at kind of taking the lead at ADAS and really understanding it and being able to train others on it. So it's not all doom and gloom by any stretch. And I think as I look at it, and one of the constants we've seen in our industry is the need to get new people into the industry. I think ADAS and the technology in general that we've got in vehicles is starting to maybe even make our industry a little bit more appealing to that younger person, because they see something that's not just doing brake jobs or doing something like that. They see a pretty cool opportunity. And for the right person, and I think the right person in this scenario has to be somebody that's very meticulous. They have to be very I think they have to be very serious about it, right? It's not one of those things that you can just kind of do, or you don't maybe do all the research that you should. You really need to dive into it. So I think I'm saying all of that to say it's a really good opportunity to potentially bring in that next generation of technician that's looking to do something different than what we commonly do in our industry right now.
I would 100% agree with that. And I mean, the autonomous driving is going to happen. I think there are actually mandates in the that vehicles starting, I believe in 26, 25 or 26, at least have a windshield camera. So yes, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to be more. It's not going to go away. As far as somebody getting into that industry, start to get to know the vehicle. I think you should have a mechanical background to get started, just to have an idea of what you're actually looking at. That is the biggest thing. And then you have the potential to do a lot of interesting things with the ADAS systems itself. There, to me, it's definitely something which has changed my whole view on automotive. At first, I was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" To now, it's like, this is actually pretty cool. I can go down the highway and I don't have to monitor my speed the whole time, because it keeps me at a safe distance from the car in front of me if I engage that system. Some people say, I don't want it to keep the center lane, lane departure warning and all that. I don't want it to take over my steering wheel. You can turn that system off. You have your choices how autonomous you want your car to drive. Well, again, you have to do your research on it. And yes, it's a new part in the industry, or newer part in the industry, and it is definitely another type of technician in the industry, and hopefully it will attract a lot of people to it.
I think it's interesting you just said that you still would advise that a young person coming in get a mechanical background, not even just a young person, just anybody that's really, really interested in ADAS, but to have that mechanical background is still essential, right? Because you are still dealing with the mechanical side. And I always refer back to when I first started off as a technician, what I think a major mistake that I made was that I wanted to jump to advanced diagnostics right off the bat, right? I didn't really take the time and effort needed to really truly understand the mechanical components, along with the different types of sensors, the different types of everything. There's so many variables, and truly understanding how to read a schematic, and really going through it a little bit to learn the stuff, because I think there are a lot of people, a lot of young people especially, that want to hop up to that advanced level right off the bat. And I just had this conversation with a young technician a couple of weeks ago where I'm like, you need to learn the basics. You need to learn the kind of a base level of knowledge of how things work, because otherwise, if you go and you try to do this advanced stuff, you're just not going to have the familiarity you need to really truly understand a system.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm probably going back a little bit into my soccer coaching,
Love it.
but the uh, the foundation of your skill is going to be with the basics. So you start with one kid a ball, and they need to learn how to dribble. Then they need to learn how to dribble with both feet. Then they need to learn how to juggle, and you go back and forth, you go forward and forward, you advance from one step to another. You learn how to clean the wrenches, you learn how to use the wrenches, you learn how to loosen and tighten bolts, you learn that not every bolt can be tightened as strong as you are, or you put all your power into it, because an 8 millimeter bolt makes a difference from a 17 millimeter bolt, right? So there's a difference, and you need to learn these little things. And again, repetition is the key to learning. Do it over and over again. Build your foundation. Just like any good building, you have a solid foundation you can build on, and you can go anywhere you want to. Your limitations are up to yourself. I mean, that's all there is to it, really. It's as simple as it is. And if you find a process and on how to do things, here we go again to the documentation. I think you had a year ago or something with Pencil Wrench, I think. Great
Yeah.
podcast. I really enjoyed that and everything you said. But um, find your way in learning the process on how you do things and how things are repaired, but also learn the vehicle, the simple rudimentary vehicle, how it works, how it functions, where things are. Uh, Whether it's your turn signal, that no, there is no blinker fluid, this kind of stuff. Learn your details about the vehicle and what certain systems do and how they work together. Your cam and your crank have to work in synchronicity. They have to work together. And if you know the details of everything, then you can go into your advance. But take the time. It's like I will tell you this: it's something when I first moved here to the United States in 1995. I thought, I'm from Germany. My system, or the way I learned to be an automotive technician, I'm so much better than everybody else. I had my head full of, BS, really, honestly. Embarrassing to think about my younger self at times.
Like we all did that. Not the Germany side, but the yes, we think we're a little ahead of the game a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we do. And I had the same, just very poor, at times, very poor attitude and the image of myself of being something better. Well, when you go into a new situation or when you go to learn something, just treat everybody with the respect, even if it's a 15-year-old. He or she may have something to teach you you don't know, or they have something to tell you which gives you a different point of view. So if you open it up and allow yourself to learn and soak in all the information you can, no matter how old you are, I think there's a lot you can discover for yourself. And that's what I would tell anybody, really. Whatever you do, just really soak it up and get the information from everybody. You're not superior to anything. And I learned it the hard way at times, but I'm glad I learned it.
I think that is such wonderful advice. And again, going back to a conversation I had recently, we're talking about the importance of keeping your toolbox organized, keeping your tools clean. Really, when you're starting off in this industry, and a lot of young technicians are thinking in the back of their heads, man, I'm just stuck in this loop bay. I can't get out. Like I feel like they just kind of threw me back here, and I'm not really learning anything. I'm not really, and I think that's really a mistake to think that way as a young person, right? Because if you go in and you look at that like other countries do, and I will maybe take just a couple minutes to talk about your experience in Germany or in other countries in general, but that is one thing where I think maybe other countries do it a little bit better than we do, where we really view it as a true apprenticeship, that you're truly trying to learn this craft, and there are ways to organize your tools that are better than you're currently doing it. There are ways to clean your tools better. There are ways to just do a write up on a work order better than we do it, right? And so when you're in those early days of this industry, the more you can focus on just perfecting your craft and really getting good at the simple things, I feel like that's what leads to a really good diagnostician in a person that truly understands systems, because then you're just building off of that solid foundation, just like you were talking about with soccer. I think that is such a great piece of advice.
Yeah. Again, agreed. As far as my background goes, real quick on the German apprenticeship, it's
Yeah.
three and a half year program where you go. You obviously start with a shop. You find a shop. You enter the apprenticeship. You actually sign a contract, and they will provide you with tools. In Germany, they provide you with tools actually, um, and you have a once a week school session where you go one day a week. You go to school and you start with the basics really from your first to your third year. But then there are different courses where you go into learning centers for a week or maybe two, and you start with metalworks, like how to work on a lathe for automotive technicians. So it's metalwork,
Love
it's
that.
it's it's welding. You get certified. So even if you don't want to work in the automotive business, you can become a professional or well full time welding in the construction or in wherever welding is required. So you're certified there. You can go into manufacturing because you know how to work a lathe. You know how to work with files and how to work with metals. Um, so you get into simple diagnostics with electronics, just a simple battery testing, charging system testing, going into more defined tracing, open circuits, et cetera, et cetera. So all these things, fuel systems, you learn fuel systems, you learn how obviously fuel is even refined from oil and all that. So there's the base of our information or the way we learn these things. It's a 3.5 year program where, and once you start, you're finished, you're a certified technician, and you have the hands-on 4 days a week, and you have once a week the theoretical part, and you go back and you work. You're linked up with a mentor as a trainee, and you really start from your first day on. You start cleaning the tools. It's really and we are certified. That is the biggest thing. That is to me one thing I don't understand here. If you have somebody working on a car, especially the cars they are now, I feel the United States could do a better job of having a really certified technician working on the car, because sometimes you really don't know. This guy is doing a great oil change, or he's really cheap at doing the oil change, but is he capable of replacing my alternator? That's the question. So if you go into a shop in Germany and they are a certified shop, there is a regulation behind it, and not just anybody can open a shop and start working on vehicles. So that's one
So
thing here.
I've got a few questions for you off of that, because I think it is really worthy of conversation. And I think we're going to have a panel at some point where we talk about this and how other countries do it, because there's so much to learn. One of the questions I have, what age do you go into the apprenticeship in Germany? Like, is it after like a high school, or like what's the time frame there?
Well, the school system is a little bit different. So it's 10
Yeah.
years of school, at least when I don't know how it is now, but it's 10 years of school. So you're done as a 16-year-old, and you can start in the apprenticeship program. So a friend of mine became a carpenter. I decided that I don't want to work with my hands. And I went to a business school for 2 years, and then I decided that I don't like that either. So, and then soccer came back in and looped me into this kind of industry, which I'm very thankful for. I got into the automotive industry due to a sponsorship and helping me with playing as a summer professional for a little bit. But like I said, I wasn't good enough, so I'm stuck with automotive, and I'm not unhappy. I can't complain. But yeah, 16 years is usually where the kids start the program. But some start later. Some start with 18, or just have a mind change like I did, where they just go like, nah, this is not for me. I want to try something different.
How does that work then? Is that so? Certification, is that run by the country? Is it run by like a private association? Like who actually provides the certification?
It's that's for the skilled trade chamber of commerce. I would guess it's the best way to translate it.
Yeah.
It comes from a long history of back when you had the guilds in Europe for carpenters, for blacksmiths. They all had their own associations, so to speak, and that graduated into that governing, more or less governing body, to control the quality of the education for the technicians, for the upcoming technicians. And it's every skilled trade has that in Germany.
Now, I don't know current day how much knowledge you have on this, but does Germany have a technician shortage like we have here in the United States?
Yes.
They do. Okay. So it's still a struggle to get more people into the industry, even with a different process. That's something that Dave Johnson and I spoke about on the podcast we did about ASE a few weeks back, that we are in this weird kind of area where I think there's a lot of people that would really, really like to have a more proper certification process and be able to use that, to tell a customer, hey, we are certified, and not only just certified, but actually can do the repairs the right way. But then at the same time, while we desire that, we're in this position where we have such a shortage of people to fill all the open roles that you kind of look at it as almost another barrier to being able to get to where you want to go. And so I think we as an industry really struggle with that side. Like, how do we get through that part? And I do think for all of us to learn more about how other countries do things, and knowing that we don't have all the answers, but hey, maybe we can take pieces and parts from other countries and how they go about their business. I think it's fascinating that school in Germany only goes till 16. And in some ways, I feel like that's really smart, because so many kids end up going through high school in the US that have no interest in going to college, right? They come up through, and the faster they could get into their trade of choice, the more likelihood, one, that they're going to stick in that trade, but two, that like to spend 3 to 3.5 years in a program versus our typical, we go through high school, then go to a tech school, pretty traditionally for technicians, that you're really only spending the 2 years really focusing on your craft. And even in a lot of the advisory committee meetings that I sit in right now, we're trying to get as much curriculum in those 2 years as we possibly can. And even going back to even like the 1 year programs, and there's some really good programs. It's just a lot of information in 1 year. At times, I don't know that we give a person enough time to digest all of the information that we're getting. And as technology is getting more and more evolved, I love that system that Germany's got, where you are learning about metals. You're learning about not only, what oil a vehicle takes, but, how it's made. The examples that you used, I think, would help so many of our young technicians out if we were to spend a little bit more time in getting them trained up. But we're kind of in this environment right now where everybody's in a hurry to get to where they're going, right? And so it's hard to get people to slow down a little bit. And I'm probably the number one most guilty person of that. So it's one of those challenges that I see in the industry that I think with more conversation, we can come up with better alternatives or come up with better ways of doing things. And a lot of great people doing great things in the industry. And it's going to take some time to get us maybe a little more right. But that is incredible insight. We could spend an entire podcast just talking about how Germany does things. So, but no, all of this is just incredibly good information. And I learned a lot as we're going through this podcast today. Thank you for allowing me to ask some very, very simple questions. Is probably very elementary for you. But for somebody like me, it was really, really helpful to get a base level understanding of a lot of things that we're working on.
Well, I hope I could answer a couple of questions and they made sense. I want to touch real quick on your statement as far
please.
as getting for the U.S. or in the United States to that kind of. I think the first thing is to have recognition. There needs to be public recognition. We're talking about a system which in Germany has been evolved over several hundred years. There's a time advantage we have. There's a recognition and it's being acknowledged. That is not the case here. So that is the biggest stumbling block you're dealing with right now. So public knowledge about what needs to be done or what is involved in automotive repair these days. The same with educating people about ADAS system. It's the same thing. We need to have more conversations beyond the range on what's going on in the automotive world, and that's where you're doing a fantastic job. And I really enjoy being part of it and enjoy learning about all your different guests, and they bring a lot of things to the table. But I think the bottom line for everybody is the same. We want technicians to come into this. We want you guys to take the time to learn. And no, you cannot do it in a year program. You just cannot. You can take your time, and that's the advantage in the German system. You get a little bit of a theoretical part, and then you go back into the shop, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I've seen this before. I understand why the oil is so. It's a lubricant. I understand what it's doing and what its jobs are, and how it's constructed, or how it's made, what it's made of. And all of a sudden, your whole job becomes more interesting. Instead of just opening the oil pan and let it drain out, it's like, oh, that's nasty. It's like, oh, look, there it goes, and it's this color because there's all this stuff in there from the engine burning the fuel and everything you have, or the metal, and this kind of stuff, which adds value to our knowledge, and hopefully, eventually, it will get some people going. And the last thing I will say, I know we're running to the end. Just go out there. Don't waste all that money on a college education you have to pay back when you can start making money right off the bat. You don't run into debt, and you can start earning money pretty quickly. It's not the worst thing. It really is not.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think we'll have some interesting content coming down the road. We'll have to get hooked up with some folks in Germany to see if we can either do kind of a shop tour, a virtual shop tour of a shop in Germany, or just try to understand maybe a little bit more of what the Germans are doing, because I'm sure there are a lot of things that we can learn, and great points all around. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you, and really, really appreciate you taking the time to do it.
It's been a really great pleasure, and I'm glad I was able to put some information to it. And I really appreciated you allowing me to speak here. That's really a treat.
All right. Thank you, Jay. We'll hopefully talk to you again here sometime soon.
I hope so. Thank you, Jay.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.